So, welcome to the overview on the system conversion to SAP S/4HANA. We aim to have the end-to-end overview here. It's the part one. So it's the general introduction on the system overview, on the tools that are essential, the aspects to consider in here. And obviously, if it's titled part one, there's a part two as well that is more dealing on the news for those that are experienced with conversion. My name is Boris. I'm working as a product manager for the software update manager, the tool that is doing the technical conversion from an ERP system to SAP S/4HANA. A disclaimer could be that I mention or show things that are not yet available. Do not take this as a decision to buy SAP license for software update manager. No. That was just kidding. Agenda. We have three sections in there. The system requirements, so what kind of systems are capable to be converted into SAP S/4HANA. We have the preparation with some checks on the source system, and we have the actual technical conversion, the execution, where the software update manager, abbreviated as some tool, is doing the job. Starting with the requirements, first kind of repetition. You should be aware of the three ways we have towards SAP S/4HANA. The system conversion is one of three scenarios, transition scenarios, and the system conversion is converting one ERP source system into one SAP S/4HANA system. And if I say SAP S/4HANA, then this is the on-premise edition always. So it's a one-to-one relationship. It's a complete source system that has been converted and is always targeting SAP S/4HANA on-premise. That is the topic for today. There are two other scenarios. There is the new implementation starting from scratch or greenfield approach, where first the installation takes place and then selective data transition happens. We have the third scenario called selective data transition, where further possibilities are, like merging several source systems into one SAP S/4HANA system. There is a blog that explains the three scenarios if you are interested in there. Again, it's only about the system conversion, and the CAA 114 is the overview session on giving the overview on all three scenarios. Okay, it is about system conversion. That's not surprising if we consider the title of the session. And now about the S/4HANA family. First of all, we see left-hand side, the classical SAP Business Suite. And as I told you, we convert just an ERP or ECC system, not the other members of the Business Suite family. And the S/4HANA family, then right-hand side, up above, you see S/4HANA Cloud. That is not a topic for us, because when a conversion happens, it always targets the S/4HANA on-premise. You see the very early member of the family, like Simple Finance 1503 and S/4HANA Finance 1605. That is not a valid target nowadays any longer. We have the new versions listed here, like 1709, 1809, 1909, especially S/4HANA 1909 is out since last Friday. It's generally available. And you know the story that up to now the numbers give a hint on which year this was generally released and the month in there. So that is the conversion targeting this. We have to consider the general release strategy of SAP S/4HANA. We have, let's take as example, 1909 out there with support package stack 0. It's the initial shipment. And then there will be two feature package stacks, FPS1 and FPS2. After this, there will be support package stacks afterwards. Technically, it's the same, just that the feature package stacks may deliver minor new features, as the name says. But after feature package stack 2, we consider this release as stable, no more new features in there, and that's why it's then in the maintenance line, and we call the updates, so to say, support package stacks. And we have a strategy to say for a conversion, you should only target the latest two stable releases. That's why you see striking through here 1511 and 1610. These releases are no longer valid for a conversion as a general statement. Putting this into scene and repeating, one ERP system is converted to S/4HANA, and this is the overview about the family in here. Then on the next slide, we see the overview about the requirements. Again, I told you in ERP 6.0 source system, it can have any enhancement package, even 0, which is not an enhancement package, it's just a level without enhancement package. So it's not required to have a specific enhancement package level, and it's not required that the source is already running on HANA database, important, for what we call the one-step conversion. So one procedure, one downtime that has specific requirements for the source system, like source system has to be on Unicode. Hopefully that is not a surprise for you, because years ago SAP announced that the successor of NetWeaver 740 will be Unicode only, and any path to this will have to start from a Unicode system as well already. That's what we announced, and that is the requirement we have. And the source system has to be an ABAP single stack, so no dual stacks allowed in there. We are going away from dual stacks anyhow, but could be the case that your ERP system is running with the portal on the same database with the same system ID. This is a dual stack system, not supported to start a conversion from. You may consider to do the dual stack split as a separate small project beforehand. And again, the source system does not have to run on HANA database. That's not a requirement. If it is running on HANA database already, you have to consider to move to HANA 2.0, to do the HANA upgrade beforehand, because the technical tool, the SAM tool, will not consider to do the database upgrade for you. That's a general rule. The SAM tool never upgrades the database level for you, so that will have to be done beforehand, because switching to the target system, example S4HANA 1909 is based on HANA 2.0. So that may be another requirement, HANA 1.0 to be upgraded beforehand. Then the target system, well, remarks on the SP levels required. Target system, just for naming, S4HANA 1909 is based on the ABAP platform 1909. And you know that S4HANA is not based on SAP NetWeaver. The concept of SAP NetWeaver is part of the old classical business suite. S4HANA is not based on NetWeaver, but of course it's based on ABAP. And we name this now ABAP platform. We already had the ABAP platform 1809. And you should consider that starting with ABAP platform 1809, obviously for S4HANA 1809, that is the platform, that this platform has a different operating system coverage. That is not a new announcement here. We had this already last year. This is concerning the application server level, not the database level. Application server instances running on a host, and the operating system of that host, there is a specific coverage of the operating systems. We are focusing on the big ones, and there are some that are no longer supported, starting with ABAP platform 1809. Important, that's why we see a link to the respective SAP node that lists which operating systems are supported and which no longer. That is the picture and the requirements overall. So I could say, if I have an ERP 6.0 system and it is Unicode, it is ABAP single stack, then am I fine to start the technical conversion already? Wait, there are some other requirements we have for the source system, and that's why there are a couple of checks to be considered that will be presented here high level. Some number game here. S4HANA 1909 is based on S4HANA Foundation 1909, things like this. Just in case you are interested in this number juggling, this is listed here. The overview about the technical process step, you see left-hand side, we have the system requirements that we have already been talking about. We will have a short look on the maintenance planner, the SI checks, custom code preparation, and an important factor there is something we call the simplification list. And the reason is that with S4HANA, some things have changed, and the things that are changed are written down in this list. So there are some changes, some adaptations, some new features, some deprecations. All this is written down in the simplification list. That will be focused on one of the following slides, of course. And this list is the foundation for these tools that we will check. The maintenance planner, SI checks, custom code. And then further on the right-hand side, you see the realization phase where the actual technical conversion happens with the software update manager, and there may be some application-specific or generic follow-up activities. Now, let's have a look on this simplification list. That is an important information point. There is a list that collects all what has changed. So the document itself tells you what has changed, what was replaced and removed between ERP and S4HANA. I should have mentioned that S4HANA is not the successor of ERP. It's a new product line. Nevertheless, there are some similarities and there are some differences. And those differences are written down in the simplification list. That is new functionality or deprecated functionality. There are some decisions. If we have a new product line, we can say in the old world we had some similar features that are offered in parallel, and now we focus on one of them to say that is the target architecture. And you have to know this. That's why you should be aware there is this simplification list that you can check. That is, it explains the potential impact on the changes there. And as I told you, there are some checks that are based on this kind of single source of truth on this list that are checking whether your source system is fine, is consistent concerning the requirements that are listed in the simplification item list. It's a catalog, so it's a browser page that you can open and you can browse there. There are different filter parameters. For example, you can even consider for an upgrade inside S/4HANA from 1809 to 1909, you may use this list as well to see what's new in there. It's available as a PDF document as well. That's important because there is more text in the PDF than on this simple list. And there are important blogs that support you on this simplification item understanding and on the top simplification item lists in there. So there are prominent examples of these simplifications, and that is business partner approach. We call this customer vendor integration. The business partner approach was already available in the ERP world. It was optional. Now with S/4HANA it's mandatory, and it's mandatory in the source system already. So there's a simplification item and a check that tells if your source system did not implement, or you did not implement in your source system, the business partner approach, the conversion is not possible. And there are tools like the Software Update Manager that checks this as well. So there are important things to consider. And now this list is pretty long. We have around about 600 simplification items. And if you open the PDF, you get a shock. Wow, so many pages. But of course, not all of these items are relevant for your system. So that is the complete truth. But there is a check that narrows this list down to what is essential for your system. And that is the simplification item check that will be executed in the source system, probably on an early stage of your project, so you get the overview and the understanding what is relevant for your system. That means only around about 40 to 80 items may typically be relevant for your project. As there are some major changes and requirements, it's a good idea to start early. And for starting early, we have to consider Fiori as well. So one slide on the Fiori aspects, it is the new user interface experience, and it's called the target architecture of SAP S/4HANA. That is one example that we say we have different UI technologies, but we target on one, and that is SAP Fiori. The SAP GUI is still supported. There are some exceptions. Specific transactions are no longer available that you may have used in ERP, and this is listed down in the simplification item list as well. There are supports to recommend which Fiori apps would fit to your system based on the usage in the ERP system. And so you can either say, I take this conversion project as a kind of big bang, and I switch all my user interfaces all to Fiori apps. That's one possible approach. You may as well decide, well, we start with some early pilot projects with Fiori and we implement the other UIs later. That's possible as well. Anyhow, you need the Fiori front-end server, and this front-end server can be deployed embedded or separate. This is the picture here. So embedded deployment means on the same host on which your S/4HANA server is located, the software for this Fiori front-end server, for the Fiori UIs, is located. That is the recommendation we have. The second option is to have a separate deployment. That means you have a separate host on which you deploy this software, the gateway and the Fiori components there. That was possible, that is still possible, it's not a recommendation. And to learn what the recommendations are, we have a blog in here and of course a release note as well, especially for SAP Fiori for S/4HANA 1909.
What is the recommendation? To have Fiori on the same box or different?
The recommendation is to have Fiori on the same box, so the embedded deployment. You may in specific cases use the hub deployment as well, but there are exceptions. If you have several S/4HANA systems in your landscape on different releases, 1610, 1909, hub deployment will not work. That's why we generally recommend to have the embedded deployment. And that's why I recommend to read this blog to see details in there. Yeah? So Fiori is important to plan beforehand which deployment object, how do we approach Big Bang or step by step. And that is important for the system requirements and planning, and it's important later after the technical conversion to implement those Fiori apps. That's the statement here on the slide. This was the section on the requirements. Now let's have a look on these checks, especially based on the simplification item list that tells me what I have to implement or consider in my source system. The first and very important tool that we recommend is the SAP readiness check. It's out there since some weeks with version 2.0. It's improved and it will be improved step by step. Even without a new number, there are incremental improvements in the tool, and it's a tool that is a kind of umbrella covering a lot of other checks that we will see here in this session. So the readiness check is partially checking what the maintenance planner is checking. The readiness check is partially checking what the simplification item check is doing and partially covering custom code preparation. And it's an important first overview on all the things to consider in your project. That's why we strongly recommend that you run the readiness check very early, and there is no additional license or something. There's some requirements that you have to fulfill, some nodes to be implemented in your source system. Then you will create files in your source system and then upload this to this browser page that is based on the SAP backbone. And then you get the analysis that is covering a lot of tools there. And you start this very early to get the overview, and you can repeat this later on, and it will provide good insight. Again, it covers partially the checks that are on the duty of other tools. In some cases, it's exactly the same check. In other cases, the readiness check is not yet as accurate as the other checks, but colleagues are working on it. Anyhow, although it might not be as accurate as the dedicated check, it's a good idea to start early with this overview as a preparation. So it's a holistic system analysis, and it is covered in another TechEd session here as well. That is the link to the respective node, and that is a screenshot. So it's a Fiori user interface with different areas there, with add-on checks and sizing checks and recommended Fiori apps and action items, custom code, all that stuff. So very good overview in there, and strongly recommended. I will not explain all these tiles right now because most of them are covered in the other checks that we have there. Just wanted to emphasize it's important to be aware of, and if my browser session was not excused, I forgot to switch the language of my browser. That's why you will see some German text now. Nevertheless, you get a small understanding, a short understanding of these areas here. So Vereinfachungselemente, simplification items. What's new is activities for simplification items. That's something that is new. That is not just how many items do I have, but what is the amount of work behind such an item. Some items just require you to do small adaptations. Some items like business partner approach is a small project on its own potentially. And that's what we have in there. So this is the overview with the tiles, and you can dive into these areas by clicking on the titles. Add-on compatibility is an important factor that is originating from the maintenance planner, but the readiness check is executing exactly the same check. So it's a nice overview, and the entry page of the readiness check explains what to do. So there are some analysis, and then down there, system preparation and upload of the files. Really strongly recommended. As I told you, there are some identical checks, and the maintenance planner is one of those examples where the readiness check can execute exactly the same check, is executing the check that the maintenance planner is doing. You know the maintenance planner, of course. It is the successor of these famous maintenance optimizer MOPS, which is no longer available. It's a central planning tool. It's a browser-based tool that has access to the system data because your solution manager is replicating the data to the SAP backbone, so the maintenance planner knows the status, component level of your system, and you can use it to plan it. Checks in the maintenance planner are checking on component level. It's not only used for a check, it can and will be used for a planning as well. So two different aspects. The first is checking the source system concerning components and especially add-ons and business functions. For this check of the source system, your company does not require to have an S/4HANA license already. You can run this check very early without maybe the decision already taken to do the conversion to S/4HANA, but you can get an understanding on, for example, the add-ons. That's important because, sorry, I have to repeat it several times, add-ons may be an influencing factor for the project, especially add-ons from partners. So first, checking the source system on component level, business functions and add-ons. And if this check is green and if your company has the license for S/4HANA, then you do the second part, that is planning, actually creating a maintenance transaction. That's how we call it. And that means you define exactly which target level, and you will get the software archives for S/4HANA in the download basket and this famous stack XML, this kind of recipe that is required later by the software update manager that is expecting this. This planning for the conversion will consider the software for the front-end server as well already. So that is part of it. For those add-ons that are capable to be uninstalled, for those add-ons, it's possible to tell the maintenance planner, I would like to uninstall this add-on. That is technically possible. And you should check third-party add-ons in time. That is very important. We always have examples of projects where it took a lot of time, and some money to clarify the situations on partner add-ons, whether they have a version that is supported to run on the target S/4HANA level. So that's why strongly recommended to start very early. That is important. Well, of course, you will not just uninstall an add-on because the add-on is capable to be uninstalled. It's a business decision whether you need the add-on or whether it is replaced by a new functionality from SAP S/4HANA or something like this. But technically, that is the statement. Well, the maintenance planner has this tile overview where there's a tile for planning for S/4HANA. You click on this tile, then you decide to do the conversion in there. The next step will be to specify your source system. And for the selection of the source system, not really visible here, of course, only those systems that apply to the rules are shown, so only ERP 6.0 or higher. And you specify the target S/4HANA version. Finally, you select the front-end server. That is the decision on co-deployment or separate deployment. And if you then click Next, this check is executed. You will get the overview on the add-ons and potentially business functions that are affected as well. And if this check is green and you have the HANA license, you can continue to do the planning. That is the maintenance planner. So the maintenance planner is an example where the readiness check is executing the same check like the maintenance planner. So identical check. That's not the case in all areas. Looking at our little picture here, we had a look at the maintenance planner. Pling, pling. Now the simplification item checks. And that is a check report that you execute in the source system. And this will check your source system, for example, whether business partner approach is already implemented. These checks are shipped with specific TCI nodes, transport-based correction instruction. We have chosen this to ease up the process because there are a number of SAP nodes to be implemented in the source system. They contain the checks. For all these items that have to be checked, this has to be implemented via nodes in your source system and the framework as such as well, so the report. And you start this early again and you determine which simplification items are relevant and which are inconsistent in your system. So first, what is relevance? There are some checks concerning components, and if this software component is not part of your source system, the check is not relevant. If the check is relevant because you have this component, then the question is whether your system is consistent concerning the check, whether business partner was already implemented. That are the two levels. in there. So relevance check and consistency check. And that is, by the way, also relevant if you do an upgrade from S/4HANA 1709 to 1909. That is relevant. You have to execute the check. You have to clear up all open issues, because later the software update manager will run exactly the same report, the same check. And if the SUM tool detects, oops, there's an issue, the tool will say, that's a stop. I will not proceed. You will not be able to convert the system because requirements are not fulfilled. Third part in this overview, after the maintenance planner, that is checking the source system more on component level, and the simplification item check more on business or application level. We have now custom code preparation. Why do you have to consider to work on your custom code? Because S/4HANA is simplified also on database level, on repository level. That means there are some new SAP objects and some old SAP objects are gone, and this is true for database tables as well. So there are famous examples like AC.A, that is the universal journal for financial area, that is the new table, and there are a couple of old tables that are deprecated, and the technical conversion will transfer the content from the old table to the new table. So there are some tables no longer valid, no longer to be used. And if in your source code, in your custom code, you have used these objects, you have to adapt this. That's why it's important to consider custom code as well in there. There are different phases for this. In dark blue, you see custom code preparation with custom code scoping and S/4HANA checks. And later on, after you have converted your development system, you will do the actual functional adaptation. You check your coding first, but before you convert your development system, you cannot adapt your custom code because most of the new objects are not yet there. They come with the S/4HANA software, so you first have to convert your development system and then adapt your coding. You put the adaptations into a transport request and can use this transport request for the other system conversions like QAS and especially prod. What does custom code scoping mean? That means which code is to be adapted at all. If you start the list of this check, you will get a long list of all your custom objects that have to be adapted, but not all of them may be relevant any longer. Maybe S/4HANA already has a functionality that can be used, so your old code for analysis is no longer required. Embedded analytics is one example. So first of all, you check whether new functionality is there provided by SAP, which does not need, so that you do not need to have custom code on this. Second aspect is your custom code used at all? You should run statistics on the usage of your custom code pretty long. So like starting with a readiness check very early, 1 year before you start your project, you should start the statistics on the usage of your custom code, run it through over 1 year at least to really know which coding is not used at all. So no need to adapt it, we can delete this coding. That's what's called custom scoping. There are tools for this listed in here. And there's a new Fiori app that supports you in there. And by the way, there's an excellent session here at TechEd on custom code adaptation. That's why I will restrict this to the basic information in here. So first you track which custom code is used. You can get a list on this. You decide what to adapt. You have a remote check of your source system, what has to be adapted. And again, the simplification list is the foundation because this list tells the check tool which objects are no longer there from SAP, so your coding will have to be adapted in there. Yeah, and again, in green, the advertisement in the new Fiori app allows efficient custom code analysis. That is the checking part based on which code is used at all. And after the conversion, there's the adaptation of your custom code, and you use the ABAP development tools, the Eclipse plugin for this, to adapt this, and there are excellent support, meanwhile, quick fixes for semi-automated code adaptation to reduce the effort in there. First, you reduce the effort by shrinking down what has to be adapted, and then this support of the tools will lower the effort as well. The colleagues will always, from ABAP, will always recommend to do performance tuning. It's always a good idea. That's true for the S/4HANA target system and custom code there as well. Again, two sessions in here that provide more insight in there. I have one additional slide, and this is concerning how to do the check of your custom code. You cannot run the check for your custom code directly in your source system where your custom code is located, because for this check you need specific functionality. And of course, we do not want you to upgrade your source system first to get the check functionality in there. So you have a separate system to do a remote check to your source system. And meanwhile, there are three different possibilities to do this analysis. These are the three columns. The first column here is the one that we kind of started with. You require a separate ATC check system that is based on basis 752 or higher. That can be a small install, a small system. It can be a temporary system. You do not need it through all the project, so you may use it for some weeks, for example. So you may install a separate system. There's not much load on it. It can be a virtual system. You can deploy it on the cloud appliance library, for example, to advertise this CAL solution from SAP. And then from this system, you run an ABAP test cockpit variant targeting your source system, and then you get the list of what is to be adapted. This check will not extract the custom code from your ERP system. It will just extract the meta information, the references in there. That can be used. You get the findings in there and simplification information in here. That's what we started with. So either you install such a basis system, small one, or something else that you can do. You can say, I have my sandbox, and I already converted my sandbox to S/4HANA 1909. And if you still have this converted sandbox, where you probably did not care about custom code in the beginning, you can think about, well, 1909, Boris told us it's based on basis 754. Okay, that's higher than 52. You can use this converted sandbox to do the remote check in your source system. That's another possibility in there. Still, we received the feedback that customers, partners, projects wanted a different approach. So we came up with the option number 2 here, the second column. There is a Fiori app that simplifies this analysis. And this Fiori app is available on an S/4HANA 1809 system. Same story. You need a separate system, but you could, for example, use your converted sandbox system. You enable this Fiori app in this converted sandbox system on 1809. Let me think, 1809 is based on basis 753, so it's fine as well. Nevertheless, it's a new app, a Fiori app, that can be used. Coming to the new announcement since some weeks, since August, we have a third possibility, and this is running this Fiori app in the cloud. Cloud, what does it mean? Well, it's running in the SAP Cloud Platform in the ABAP environment of SAP Cloud Platform. That's the official name. The unofficial name that I will not tell you is Steampunk. Well, you know Steampunk is ABAP environment in SAP Cloud Platform. So you may get the license for this ABAP environment, and then you can use this Fiori app in the cloud platform instead of having a separate own system.
So we can't use Solution Manager at all.
Solution Manager is not used for the ABAP test cockpit checks for custom code at all. So that is not applicable.
Second option, can we use a Cloud Appliance Library instance?
The question was on the Cloud Appliance Library, whether this provides the option to run S/4HANA 1809 as well. I'm pretty sure that the Cloud Appliance Library offers an instance for 1809, and then you may use this. You have to implement this Fiori app, so a bit configuration, and that's a good idea as well. Similar like I told you for option number 1, basis 752 running in CAL, this would work for 1809 as well. The third option is the new one, but it requires a license for Cloud Platform. That's to be considered there. So that was the short overview. There's much more to tell. Again, I recommend strongly to at least check the documents from the colleagues there in the sessions, or if possible, attend these sessions on custom code adaptation. Now, I told you a lot about checks. Let's try to get an overview. This picture shall represent your ECC source system. We have application level above and database level below, and there were some checks. The recommended check is the S/4HANA readiness check, again with the link to the session here. That is a kind of umbrella, and it's improved step by step. The dedicated separate steps to check are simplification item checks that are checking the source system more on business data level, application level. Then we have the maintenance planner that is checking the source system more on component level and business function level, especially add-ons. Then concerning operating system and database level, we have the software update manager. That is the tool to execute the technical conversion. When you start the tool for a conversion, the tool will check operating system and database level anyhow. You may also run this sum in a specific mode to only check OSDB requirements. Do nothing else. That's what we call the sum prerequisite check in there. So that is specifically only applicable for a conversion. It's a quick check, but on the other hand, you can read the notes and the guides as well. That's possible. Finally, we have the Z objects there in the source system, so your custom code objects that are checked by the custom code checks and the requirements adaptations in our development tools. That is the kind of overview on the checks that we had there. So we had the system requirements, we had a short overview on the checks, most of them based on the simplification item list. But as the list is very long, you use the checks like simplification item check to narrow down the results to what is relevant for your system. If you have done all this and you have adapted what is required, then it is about to execute the technical conversion using the sum tool. And the aspect of data conversion is explained now as well. So the data conversion is part of the system conversion. The picture here now shows left-hand side the kind of family of the tables of the SAP Business Suite or especially ERP system. And then right-hand side in blue we see the simplified view on the tables that are part of S/4HANA. So we have simplified this to speed up the applications, and this has an impact on the technical conversion. Because the business data, the table content, have to be moved into the new tables. There is again this famous example, AC.A, the Universal Journal, and content from these tables listed like GLT0 and others are merged into AC.A. Another example is MATDoc, which is the new table, and MKPF and MSEC are moved, the content is moved into this one. So this has to happen during the technical conversion. We will have a look at this. But just to already now say the conversion will only copy the content from old table to new table. So after the technical conversion, the old tables are still there with the old content. It's not as easy to simply say I drop the tables, because in some cases the content is partially still required. That's why last year we came up with the content of obsolete data handling. The concept of obsolete data handling says after the technical conversion, after your system is converted to S/4HANA, let's say 1809, you would like to get away from the old table content that is no longer required. SAP has the knowledge which tables can be completely deleted or for which tables only fields or rows can be deleted. And SAP, the application development, has put this into rules, and there is a report that applies this rule. So you start a report, and this report will tell you, I can delete the respective content if you like. After the conversion, during business operations of your productive system, you can do this, because SAP delivers these rules, what content can be deleted. And it's listed here, the respective node.
So do you have the best practice or recommendation for the SAP system, because you develop fields and all the changes, right? MKPF and MSEC converting the network. So the SAP system will get impact there.
The question was on best practices or recommendation for SLT, system landscape transformation approach. I'm not aware of this, but this may be due to my restricted knowledge on this. Yeah. So I assume that all SAP solutions and features are aware of which tables have been converted in there. Yeah? Especially like examples MKPF and such. So that was the outlook after the conversion. You may consider to handle old data, but we did not start the conversion yet. So let's have a look on this tool, the sum tool, what the tasks of this tool are. First of all, update.
Can you say please commented timeline to delete the table data?
If I got the question right, the question was whether there is a recommendation of timeline to delete the old data. That is up to you. As soon as you have the new system running and it's productive in business operations, you may decide to do this the one or the other day. So the conversion task for the software update manager is that we have new components. So the software update manager can do the software update, of course, and it will partially do the conversion to the new data model. So the conversion of table content into MATDoc, for example, is executed by the software update manager. This simple architecture picture here tells, let's assume the source is already running on HANA database, which is not a requirement. Then we have this simple picture. We have the application server host on which you start the software update manager, and the source is this target database host. In case that your system is not yet running on HANA, then the architecture picture shows two database hosts, the source database and the target HANA database, and the software update manager will execute the migration. The tool has this option called database migration option that will migrate the content from source to target database if required. That is the architecture picture in here. So what is required before you start the software update manager? Up above you see again this picture. So of course you have to run the maintenance planner to provide the stack XML and the software archives. So you have to run the maintenance planner, you have to do the checks, they have to be green, you have to do the planning, otherwise you cannot start the software update manager. Then, as mentioned as well, the simplification item checks have to be executed and you have to take care for all issues, for all errors. Only if all issues are solved, the software update manager will run through. The tool will start the same report that you start manually, actually twice, once in the beginning and once shortly before downtime, and if there's an issue, the tool will stop. Optional activities, depending on your system type, readiness check is not required. The SUM tool will not ask you whether you have done the readiness check, but it is strongly recommended. Then custom code check. The SUM tool does not care whether or not you have adapted or checked your custom code. So for a sandbox run, you may just ignore custom code. You would like to see your sandbox can be converted, and you do not care about custom code, whether it works afterwards or not. Finally, as already mentioned, the SUM prerequisite check is optional, can be executed, and it is documented in the conversion guide in there. And it's mentioned in our CAA 261 hands-on as well. An advertisement on a specific feature of the software update manager is here. This is called DMO with system move. So DMO with system move, that means obviously DMO, we have a migration case. This scenario only applies if your source system is not yet on HANA, only then we have migration. If this is the case, you may consider to not only switch the database host, but to switch the complete system, so changing the application server as well, the application server host. In the plain conversion, the application server remains stable, but you may consider to use this to switch the complete system. For example, you would like to use the downtime to exchange your hardware, so moving to a different host, or you may consider to move your system from one data center to a different data center, which is not supported for plain DMO due to latency issues, or you may even consider to move your on-premise system into the cloud. But if I say cloud, let's be careful. IaaS means infrastructure as a service. That means you move your on-premise system into a cloud environment where the S/4HANA on-premise edition is then running. So you combine the conversion with the transition to Google Cloud Platform, to Microsoft Azure, to Amazon Web Services, to hyperscalers like this. This is possible with what we call DMO system move. Small side remark, to be honest, currently with SUM 2.0 SP6, which is out since 2 weeks, and with Target 1909, this scenario is not supported. The answer why this is the case is given in part 2, so take part in part 2 there. It's a small remark, and it's a temporary restriction that we have that will be solved in the future with a later SAM SP version there. No timeline, sorry, we hope to have it next year. A very rough answer on the question on timeline. We are strongly, or the SAM development team is strongly working on it. We are aware of the relevance of this scenario, but I cannot promise any date yet. That is DMO system move, again only applicable if the source is not yet on HANA. A short look on the main blocks of the technical conversion. We have on the left-hand side the uptime processing, that's why it's written in green, where SAM is preparing something, is creating the usual shadow repository already to have less activities and downtime. Then we have the ramp down. The technical SAM downtime consists of the migration if the source is not yet HANA. Then we have the update part like structural adaptations, and we have the conversion part that is partially executed by the software update manager and partially to be executed afterwards. So especially the Fin migration has to happen after the SAM run is finished in the IMG. So customizing activities, and then you trigger the data migration for Fin data afterwards. And since this is not part of the SAM downtime, whenever you discuss downtimes with colleagues, with partners, with SAP, be very specific which downtime you are referring to. The SAM downtime is only a part of the technical downtime. The technical downtime that includes the financial data conversion is only a part. The overall business downtime is of course relevant for the project then. That's why to be specific on downtime phrases there. Some aspects that are recommended on project planning on high level. You start your experience with a sandbox system, you iterate this, you get familiar with the procedure, you refine the project plan afterwards. Then you will do the conversion of the development system. After the conversion, you will do the adaptations of your custom code, put this into transport requests, and you will consider dual maintenance. Dual maintenance is that you consider to have one development system for your existing ERP source system and another one for S/4HANA. So dual, to be able to provide fixes for your source system, although the original development system was already converted. You run the conversion for your test systems, you do business function testing, other things, and you consider a dress rehearsal for the conversion of the productive system. That will be a rough overview on the system landscape, simplified. What is important here, and I always emphasize this, is the timing, because the software update manager is delivered with new SP versions roughly all 4 months. So we have SAM 2.0 SP5 that was in maintenance until 2 weeks ago. Since 2 weeks we have SAM 2.0 SP6 in maintenance, and SP5 is on phase patch on request. What does that mean? Having a SP version in maintenance means you can download this SP version. We will deliver patches that are available to be downloaded, but SP5, patch on request, can no longer be downloaded. We have it in phase patch on request. In case you have started your project with SP5, you are at the critical phase, you experience an issue, you create an incident, and if this is something we have to fix, we are able to deliver a patch fixing this issue, and you can continue with this new SP5 patch version that is specifically delivered only to you, not to everyone. That is phase patch on request. But then after another 4 months, SP6 is on patch on request and SP5 is out of maintenance. Out of maintenance means we cannot provide a fix any longer. And of course, if you run the productive conversion, you do not want to use an SP version of SAM that is out of maintenance. And since project runtimes may exceed for 8 months, you may consider to switch the SAM SP version at an early stage of the project. For example, after the sandbox run with SAM SP5, you switch to SP6 because your project plan says running the conversion is the time frame where SP6 is still in maintenance. In patch on request phase. That's why you have to consider this project phase to have and not to switch the SAM SP version in a critical phase. And we have 4 to 8 month maintenance phase, and relevant systems should be converted therein, saying a sandbox system is not relevant because it's not as critical there. That is what we call maintenance strategy, and this is a document and a PDF that is attached to the respective node for the software logistics toolset. That is the kind of package where some tool is one of the tools provided in there. That is a remark that I wanted to use. To finally finish with aspects to consider, you need time. You need time to clear up the simplification items. You need time for workshop, for end user training, especially if you use new Fury user interfaces. You have to train your end users. You have to adapt the authorizations. You have to have time to check third-party add-on and consider archiving to reduce the source database size and custom code. You should plan the project from start to the end together from the basis team together with the application area to have all relevant stakeholders in the team. And you need, of course, colleagues with knowledge on different areas. And for testing, you should consider 2 to 3 conversion runs, test roles and authorizations, and plan, address, rehearsal. That is some of the aspects to consider. The other session, CAA 114, the overview on the transition scenarios from Roland Hamm, provides more aspects. That is my simplified view on what to consider. That was the overview. In the document, you find lots of sources, links to look in there, and some remarks on services that we have in there, discovery. And there is especially the hint to check for more sessions. Thank you for your participation.